PM. So for the roll call, why don't we just go around the table, and maybe why don't we start with the Zoom people first?
Sure, Mark Howell's here.
Okay,
Liz
Liz?
Morrison.
Paul, you're muted.
Yeah, hi, Paul Bohm is here.
David
Dave.
Owen is here.
okay,
Jeff
Uh,
Quick is here.
okay.
Good.
Bruce, you want,
Bruce Curlis, Bill Cremeza,
Kristen Aro, Vicky Alani,
Keith Hannon, Malcolm Bryant,
Send Vivo.
Jeff Collins, Bert Collins,
Delia Kay.
Rachel Freed.
Toby Berkman, facilitator.
Okay. So, so our main goals for, tonight's meeting are to, identify takeaways and questions from the 2018 dredging feasibility study and, refine our approach to the envisioned Concord criteria. And, you can see that, and also you can see from our agenda, you can see our agenda, excuse me, on the slide. We also have, a presentation from, Keith on the dredging bid. And at 7 o'clock, right, we will open the meeting to public, right?
Yep.
Public comment as noted on the agenda. This meeting is being recorded and a video link will be posted to the task force website in a few days. Also, I just want to say that we sent an article to the Concord Bridge and we expect it will be in May 17th issue. Just kind of an update of what we talked about, where we're at, what we're doing. Okay. And
Right.
That's it for me. And want me to mention David?
Yeah, David, David, are you with us? Are you traveling?
Yeah, I'm en route. I'm only able to stay till 6 o'clock.
Okay, so we wanted to actually ask you for some thoughts about the crossover ceremony, just to mention it. Do you want to wait until you get here, or do you want to send us?
No, I'm not on my way there. I'm on my way to another meeting. I had let the task force know that I only had until 6 today and I would be on Zoom.
Do you want to say a couple words about the crossover ceremony? Thank you for inviting us. Actually,
Sure. I'm super interested in hearing what others, because it's familiar to me. I just want to, express my appreciation to the members of the task force who did come. I want to appreciate that they brought their own watercraft. That was impressive. And everybody arrived on time, and, we were appropriate when we were on the island. And, I hope that, maybe someone else who attended could speak about their takeaways and observations and its meaning to the task force.
well, I'll just mention that I thought it was great. I really appreciate the fact that you invited us, and it was wonderful to see the Cub Scouts, or the Webelos, move up to be Boy Scouts and what they had to go through, and just how the Scouts themselves ran everything. It was and how they took care of getting over from getting over to the island in the canoes, and I was really impressed. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I can echo that, it was really nice to have us out there that day, one, because Boy Scouts were able to help a lot of people get in and out of their
Right.
craft, and so I think, if you ever get an opportunity to do that, it's a really nice way to experience the island. We experienced the whole thing, thanks to David. He walked us around the entire thing. It was lovely to see it. Also, I was impressed with the leadership of the Scouts themselves. The way they conducted the entire ceremony, David, was really very mature and really, really impressive. I would say the impression I got of the island was it's much bigger when you're on it than when you're around it. So that was a surprise to me, how big it actually is. And interestingly enough, the birds really came out, like for us. I think we saw herons flying overhead. It's like they knew we were out there or something like that. And we saw all kinds of different bird life, that day, it was a beautiful, beautiful day to be out there. So, thank you, David. I don't think I'll ever experience it that way again. So it was terrific.
Well, thank you. And to your point about experiencing Scout Island, if anybody wants to come out on the island, just check in with us at the Scout House to, because we want to make sure there's not a scouting event going on out there. But and we, of course, we just want to know as best we can comings and goings. But please do experience the island.
Thank you.
I haven't got much to add, except that I found it really interesting to see how the Boy Scouts, well, I don't think we can call them Boy Scouts anymore, didn't it change?
Just
yesterday?
scouts.
Now they're just
They're now
Scouts.
scouts. Yeah.
How they have changed since I was a scout about a million years ago. But I was very impressed by how they comported themselves. Yeah.
So if anyone gets an opportunity, please do experience this. It was terrific.
I just want to add my thanks for David helping organize that. It was great. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, David. Toby.
All right, thanks, Chris. And so I want to, first of all, just welcome all the members of the public and say, if you want to scoot your chair over so you can see the slide better, please, you're welcome to do that. So I just want to say a little more about sort of where this meeting fits in within our process and what we kind of hope to get out of today. Some folks had raised with us kind of wondering, like, are we on track? So how are we moving towards our long-term goals? So we just want to kind of paint you a little bit of a picture of where we've been, where we're going, and where we are right now, and how this fits in very briefly, just to kind of address some of those questions. So in terms of today, I think our main goals were focused on dredging, right? We're looking at the 2018 report. We're going to hear a presentation from Keith. We want to, first of all, just make sure that everyone understands the basic elements of dredging as an alternative. So what it might look like, what we know about the potential impacts, what are the different options and moving pieces. And then, another key goal is kind of in this series of meetings, last meeting, this meeting, the next meeting, we're looking through these reports and we're trying to identify what are the unanswered questions, or what are kind of the elements of almost like a research agenda, right? Or a problem solving agenda that we need to set for ourselves over the course of the rest of our work. So today we want to clarify what questions are coming out of dredging, the 2018 report, what we might hear from Keith, right? That suggest areas that we need to look more into. And then, I can share this next slide here, which is sort of the overall trajectory of where we've been, where we're going. And we spent some time at the beginning just clarifying what's our mandate, what are the roles, what are the norms we're establishing as a group. We shared some different goals and interests that each of us has. Rachel and I shared a presentation that tried to summarize where you all are coming from on the different issues. And we began to identify the shared decision-making criteria. Right now, right, we're in this phase where we're developing a shared understanding of the facts of the issues, and we're clarifying what the options are that we need to consider, and we're identifying the unanswered questions that we need to address. Next phase, we're going to start breaking probably much more into work groups. They're going to go out, maybe we'll invite some experts in, but we're going to try to answer those questions, see how far we can get in figuring out what do we know, what can we know, what can't we know. And then finally, we're going to move towards evaluating the options against our criteria, trying to build consensus and eventually decision making. So just to say we're part of a pathway here, we're on a pathway here. We feel good about where we are. We can't let up, right? There's, obviously the need to keep moving forward, but this is all part of sort of developing where we need to go. We also want to note that we sent out to you this issues document, and that's a handout that you have. And we have a couple of these, actually, if members of the public want to see this as well. Okay, I'll put it close to the website, so you can look at it, but there's enough for everyone. But this is essentially a running list of the questions and issues that folks have raised as, hey, this is something we want to think about or look into. So we just want you to see that because it shows that kind of all the thinking and talking that we've been doing hasn't just been going into the ether, right? We're keeping track of this. Those conversations are leading into this document, and we'll have a chance to review it a little more later in the meeting. today's conversation, we'll add to it. And then pretty soon, we're gonna send you out to try to go answer these questions. And then hopefully when we come back and start sharing the answers, we'll be more informed and feel better able to start moving towards decision making. Okay. So we just wanted to share some of that to help you understand where we are. I'm gonna turn over to Rachel and stop sharing for now. On some other
aspects of this, yeah. So,
Paul has his hand raised.
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
sorry, Paul.
Yes,
Yeah, Toby, I'm not sure what document you're referring to that people are looking at.
yes. So this is an issue, we sent out an email, I believe Tuesday, that had this document attached to it. It's named Issues Doc. Okay, so it should be in your inbox, and if I could put it in the chat, I would, but we can't, right? So I'm gonna ask you to try to look into your email and pull it up. It was one of the kind of pre-work emails for this meeting.
What are we talking about?
We are later on. We're not gonna really delve into the details until later in the meeting, so you have some time, and I'll see if I can resend it to the group before then as well. Okay, thanks, Paul.
So many of you have been very helpful to us in giving us feedback in the after meeting surveys. And so we want you to know that we hear you, and it may not surprise any of you that there are a multitude of opinions about process particularly. So Toby and I have talked about this, we talk a lot about the process and the group and where are we going and trying to make sure that we're really addressing concerns and being as transparent as we can. And one of the things that facilitators sometimes do is we sort of draw back the curtain and we let you know something about how we're thinking and what's going on from our end and what we're seeing. And so one of the things that we're seeing is that there are members of the task force that are very interested in process and perhaps sometimes are getting a little bit into the weeds on process. And this is normal. If you are one of those people, this is very normal, and it often is a symptom or just a suggestion of concerns about conflict. Because we know that conflict is hanging out there. So that's one of the observations that we've had, and we have been very cautious as facilitators. We have not proceeded with the same kind of initiative that we might in other groups. And that's partly because we want to be really respectful toward the norms of the way the Concord operates. And it is a little bit new for us as facilitators to be operating under open meeting law. I come from, that world, but I haven't facilitated in that world. So we're being careful about that. And we're being careful with all of you because we want to give you a chance to settle in and get to know each other and get to know us. But from our own observations and some of the feedback, we have sensed that it's time for us to tighten up a little bit on our end in terms of how we facilitate and to give you guardrails that will help you feel more confident as we approach more conflict-laden discussions, and to also be a little bit more directive about conversations so that we stay more tightly to the agenda. And that can mean stepping in a little bit more often or more firmly about where we think conversations have kind of diverted from the true kind of meat of the topics that we want to talk about. So we know that you may have concerns about that. Maybe you were worried about that. We would ask that you just let us know what we'd like to do today, and then let us know afterwards. Once you see us in more of a firm action, then let us know if you think it's too much or you want us to back off a little bit. You have very different opinions about how this group should be run, or that's caught us up a little bit, I think, in terms of trying to address everybody's concerns, and we've kind of realized we need to just do what we think will be best for the full group. Remember that our eyes are always on the group as sort of an organism. And we really look at you as a whole, even if you don't always feel like you're a whole. So that does play a role in how we facilitate, really. So that's the reflection from the mediators for today.
Thanks, Rachel. I'll hand it back to our co-chair Chris, on the minutes.
Okay, so the minutes have gone out to everyone. Do I have a motion to approve the March 21st, 2024 minutes?
Sure.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Uh,
Any opposed? Thank you. Any opposed?
No,
Okay, the minutes are approved as written.
Just because I know my colleague Charlotte is gonna need to figure this out, who did the motion and who seconded?
The motion was Malcolm, second
Yeah.
was Keith.
Great, thank you. Okay, so can I take it away on the first item here?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first item on our agenda is, we're gonna talk about the 2018 dredging feasibility study. This is really gonna be the bulk of what we talk about this meeting. I'm gonna introduce some of what we heard in the survey that went out on this. We'll have some discussion on that. Then we are gonna hear from Keith, who's gonna present on, there's some questions about and sort of summary of the bidding that came out, and ideas related to that, okay, in 2022. So I'm gonna start off again with a summary of what you all sent in the survey. So the purpose of us sharing this is to kind of advance the conversation a little bit, give you a sense of how others reacted to this document and the key questions that we might put to kind of add to that issued document around dredging, right? What are the unanswered questions we need to think about? So I'm going to go through these slides and just share with you a summary of what was submitted in the survey. You have the actual survey responses, right? Also, members of the public, we have very tiny writing, okay? The actual survey responses, you can see those. And these will be posted more legibly, appended to the meeting summary.
Is there a way that could be emailed to people who are online?
Yep, we'll do that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we want you, while we're going through this, to be thinking about a few things, right? First of all, when I share how others responded, is anything surprising to you? Or is there anything you kind of don't understand and you want to follow up and figure out, well, what is that really about? I have a question about that. I want to understand more. Second, be thinking about this as like the list of issues for us to address moving forward. Is this the right list of questions that we need to address on dredging? Are there other things that you would want to kind of mandate a work group, for example, to be looking into when we assign them to think about these issues? Okay, so with that, I'm going to do my best to share what's in this spreadsheet in a way that you all can kind of digest without having looked at it in advance, because of course we cannot do kind of offline asynchronous document distribution and commenting, right, under open meeting law. So the first question that we ask you to address is what, if any, conclusions does the 2018 report on dredging make that you think are especially relevant to the task force's analysis? And we got a variety of responses on this. I've bucketed them into a couple of main categories. Overall, for some of you, you said this really, to me, suggests like they're making positive conclusions about dredging and its benefits, right? That strikes me that this is a real, potentially viable option, right? We really need to think about this carefully. Others suggesting, there's the other options that we've been talking about to date, for example, those in the 2012 report, are characterized as real short-term fixes compared to dredging, and wondering, well, maybe we don't need to think so much about those, right, in comparison to dredging. Comment that the conclusion that this suggests dredging is a real opportunity to retain the historical character of the pond. And then some others kind of making very different conclusions. Like someone saying, I read this and my conclusion is dredging is not the final solution. It states that even with dredging, there's still going to be lots of nutrient issues. So that's one of the things that I really take from this. Another comment saying this to me suggests that there's actually an opportunity for us to weigh multiple dredging options. I'd really like to see us think more than just this one option. Other comments focused on the potential conclusions around the impacts of dredging and the approach towards dredging. So, Paul, you have two fingers there. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and just a clarifying question. Are these conclusions of the report, or these are our conclusions about the report?
Yeah, so great question. I'm trying to, so it's kind of a mix. And I would say when you take a look at the specific responses, I think you'll see that some people are just pulling out conclusions of the report and highlighting this is relevant, right? And other people are saying, like, this is what I take from that, right? So it's a little bit both. I'm trying to sort of switch between those, but I think you're right. Like, just because something is on this screen doesn't mean that it's a conclusion of the task force or a task force member, okay? So point well taken. Other people were struck that, an important thing that the report names is this 100-year timeline. That's something that, if valid, obviously would be, important for us to understand. Other people noting, important conclusion here is the impact of increased pond depth, that the report suggests that will really have a meaningful impact on recreation and habitats. Another person commenting on the use of sediment for shallow wetland beaches, the conclusion in the report that will increase biodiversity, right? That has the potential for increasing diversity and complexity of habitats. Another important conclusion that someone noted is that hydraulic dredging is seen as the only practical option in this report. If true, again, that's obviously important for our analysis. The sediment being fairly clean. And then another conclusion was the large storm or high water sediment inflows, right? And this person raising a question about the impact of those inflows on areas beyond the dredge areas, right? So we'll talk a little more about questions in a minute. And then a number of people raising sort of funding observations, noting that the report suggests limitations and difficulties in securing grant funding for this kind of project. And then a number of people naming, this long 100-year time horizon and what it suggests about, again, if accurate, kind of the large upfront cost versus much more reasonable annualized cost over the long term. So here are some of the questions that people named that they felt like should be addressed in order to fill knowledge or data gaps. So on the timeline, someone noting the 2023 report has a different timeline in terms of its estimate for in the infill duration, like how long it would last, right? So what's behind that? What's really accurate here? Other people just questioning or asking what is the reliability of this 100-year estimate, right? And specifically in light of climate impacts, right? Given rising temperatures, given increased precipitation, does that influence this 100-year estimate, even if it's accurate in and of itself, absent climate? Other people asking questions around the actual impact of dredging. So some comments noting, we're talking about dredging these small area-specific areas, right? What actual broader impact does it have on the areas that are not being dredged, on water quality in the pond as a whole, on nutrients, on the ecology, on the aesthetics of the pond as a whole, right? So that being an important area that we need to think about. Another person just questioning, like, something that we need to wrestle with as a task force is, potentially weighing the historical value of open water, its open water amenity and the history there versus potential ecological and recreational improvements that might be greater or different in other options. So kind of naming that is a key question for us moving forward. Another important question someone named, would sediments continue to be deposited where Neshoba Brook enters the pond? And what is the impact of that going to be over the long term? Is that a good thing that that's where the sediments are going? Will that improve the ecology somehow or prevent damaging impacts elsewhere, or the opposite? Just what do we know about what sediments deposition is likely to look like under this alternative? And then another question, what is a realistic depiction of the overall recreational gains here? There was a note in the report about potentially this could help with, a broader recreation across Concord, right? Walden Pond, White Pond, and this person saying, is that really true? Like, how much of a broader impact on recreation would this have, especially given that Giro Beach improvements are not proceeding, that was noted in the report, and assuming that they would be moving forward in the report. More questions? Okay, some people questioning the reliability of various conclusions or complications related to dredging. So how do we know that the dredged areas will not refill? There's existing sediment in those areas, so doesn't that suggest that sediment would again be deposited there? So is that actually a reliable conclusion? What are there potential complications of moving material below accumulated sediment? So if there's 5 feet of accumulated sediments in these areas that are going to be dredged, but we're digging down 10 feet, like what's underneath that? Could there be bedrock? Could that create challenges? Has there been water quality or phosphorus testing to help inform modeling work around water quality and nutrients? Some people raising questions around funding and costs, just generally big question among a lot of people. Actually, what is a realistic cost estimate, right? This clearly did not pan out in terms of the cost that they thought it would be. So what can we figure that out, right? Likewise, could we save in costs by using other places to place dredged material? I mean, Keith is gonna be presenting a lot more on that later today. So I'll have a chance to dig into that. And then just generally, how much work was done looking into the various funding options that are listed in the report? Where, to what extent were those really studied and seen how viable they were? And then, so finally, some questions around the approach. Could leaving more dredged material in the pond, that's sort of another option, could that have even better ecological improvements, reduce costs even further? Now thinking about MCI, right? Is it still the case that MCI does not wish to have the sediment on their land? I think that's not something that was mentioned in the report, so we probably need some clarification on that, and we can get to that in a minute. And then how does the possibility of controlling, or I should say MCI, the MCI parcel impact option? So if in the future the town has control over that parcel, does that increase the ability potentially create an avenue for reducing costs? And then finally, have there been any major stormwater management changes since 2018? Okay, deep breath, last slide.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody even commented.
Yeah, no,
Right.
not even everyone
Right.
comments. It was like 9 people. Yeah. So finally, other information about dredging that you felt like the task force needs to have, and some of this I think relates to the questions that were raised in the last 2 slides. People just saying generally on costs and funding, updated cost estimates, consideration of additional options, so placement locations, type of dredging, etc. We should look into the potential availability of new financial resources, state funding. On impacts, right? Someone noting that it appears that the surface area of the pond has been shrinking from the early 20th century, according to some maps. Is that actually the case? If that is the case, does that suggest the pond will continue to shrink, the open water area? And how does that, if it's true, impact the desirability of dredging? Another comment on PFAS. What do we know about PFAS concentrations? What are the implications of the lower standard for PFAS that EPA recently came out with on potential for swimming and recreation in the pond? This question around kind of infill and refilling. So what is the actual rate of that? What is it going to be like in non-dredged portions? What does it actually mean for the future conditions and aesthetics of the pond overall? Right, if we're having continual infill in various places, what do we know about how that's going to play out? And related question is, what are the benefits on the pond overall, or in areas that are not being dredged, right, of dredging in limited areas? And then another question is, how do we as a task force consider Giro Park and Commonwealth Ave access points as part of our deliberations? And then finally, some process issues people named. We should look into whether permitting is still up to date, if that would need to be redone. And then if we were to pursue dredging or recommend dredging, would that need to go back to town meeting? Because there's some sort of specific process questions. Okay. So, thank you for bearing with me. I know that was a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, right? But we can revisit anything, obviously, and other need to kind of dig in and get more clarity. I can hand over to Rachel to facilitate the next piece there.
So we've set aside, a good 30 minutes to have a discussion about this, so I hope you all have something to say, so otherwise we'll just have dead air for a while. So, as Toby said, we're interested in hearing if there are things that are missing, things that you're surprised about in this vast list. I would also invite you to think about if you were, whether you were a commenter or not, this is an opportunity to kind of refine the questions. And think about questions that you think we could answer, because there may be questions that we could, that you sort of put onto the list of, it would be nice to know this, but we don't know if we'll be able to answer it. There are some things looking off into the future that we don't know. We don't know whether the town will have control over the MCI land or when, so there's some things that are going to be highly speculative. But just giving some thought, to this, to the report, what you took from the report, whether or not you commented, whether you liked your comment now, whatever. What kind of thoughts do you have, and questions and concerns and comments? Yes.
Just picking up on some of the notes here, but to reiterate, one thing maybe someone could answer here, are the sediment tests still valid? Either do they expire over time? Are there new things like PFAS that are required to test for? And then one element that builds off of that is there was the single high arsenic test. Did we learn from this report or from subsequent that that's manageable, or do we need to learn more? This said that would be addressed in the 401 water quality permit, and it's like, okay, that sounds like a big unknown in terms of, does that need to be landfill then, or just that
So
a set of questions
yeah.
that we folks may have answers to.
And and what I'm hearing is you're talking about, when you say sediment test, you're talking about the chemical, the metals, but as well as the nutrient.
No, more in terms of anything that would impact disposal options and costs.
Okay.
So, and they do have a time frame on it. It's either 3 years or 5 years.
So we need to repeat.
So
all.
those tests would need to be repeated because they were done prior to the completion of the 2018 study. So at this point, they are expired. And as far as the arsenic goes, during the 401, it was addressed at that time, and then in the bid, there was, some amount of contaminated material was assumed. And that volume is, I don't recall that off the top of my head, but that was expected,
So
5,000.
as they go, this one has to.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
PFAS probably needs to be redone because at that
It
time.
wasn't,
It wasn't done.
it wasn't
Wasn't
tested,
done.
Couldn't test
right,
it.
and I don't
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
whether,
I don't know if it's required even.
Well, it's,
So
drinking
not
water
for,
side of it
right,
is,
drinking
right?
water, but I don't believe it is for sediment.
yeah, but we're prone, we know it's PFAS, it accumulates in sediment.
Yeah.
So if you take that and put it somewhere.
Right.
The PFAS then will go from there again in some water body or whatever. We need to have.
Right, so that's an unknown,
Mhm.
that's a question that would have to be.
Right, right. And the other question I would add to that is, so Sven, if PFAS testing wasn't required as part of permitting, is that something that you would still want the town to do? Like, is that?
Well, only if it's done in White Pond, Walden Pond, in the Assabet River. I mean, everywhere else where we have sediment and we're in the pond and we're touching the ground and we're touching sediment. Like if we're actually concerned about sediment, PFAS and sediment, we have sediment that we allow people to swim in everywhere. in
Yeah, but you
town.
take the.
So is it a
sediment out.
concern? Then
You
it should be
take the
global.
sediment out and transport it somewhere. And you have to be sure that then whatever is in that sediment you're transporting, either PFAS or other
Yeah.
chemicals and metals is not getting into other
And-
groundwater.
But is it already in every single piece,
It is.
which I think it is
PFAS
everywhere.
is.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna finish
PFAS
my thought if I could.
Sorry.
If it's already in every single body of water, which we think it is, we're paying $50 million to remove it from our water supply. We just approved that. If it's in every single body of water we have, and we're taking PFAS that's currently in the pond and putting it into our water supply, I don't know that we're making anything worse than where it is everywhere else in town, the Assabet and the
So-
Walden and White. So I don't know, we have to be very consistent about how we treat this testing to everywhere else in town. If we're
So-
saying that we're gonna be at a higher degree of requirements not required by the state,
I
we should be
think-
consistent throughout.
I think
town.
I would appreciate if you're collecting ideas and concerns of the members. And it's not a job to shoot down concerns and ideas people have.
I think,
What the
I,
conclusion is another topic. It's a thing we have heard from, it's in here, or some other people who wants to have it as an issue identified.
Yes, that's why I'm
Shooting
just
it
adding
down, you
consistent.
can do that later.
yes, Ben and Vicky, if I can just interject. Vicky, it sounds like what you are raising is a question about objective criteria.
Well, a little
That
bit
you
of
wanna have-
objectivity,
that you
but
wanna have
consistency.
An objective
That's right.
measure.
That's right.
And the question really between the two of you is whether the town would go beyond what an objective standard might be elsewhere.
Because
right?
sometimes, yeah, we're adding additional criteria here in
Understood.
order to not
Understood.
have it comply, or are we trying to really make the
Right.
world better by taking PFAS out of the water
So-
supply in Concord?
So you're both raising sort of opposite sides of the same coin and both should be added to the list of concerns because they're both valid. They're both just different perspectives on the same issue. You both agree PFAS is important and
Right.
it's really just a question of how bad does it have to be or what is the measure against? You know, that you would, what measure would you weigh it against for this pond? So what else? Let's leave that. Let's leave PFAS for the moment. What else?
I'm sorry, there's one other important point about PFAS. At town meeting, we learned we already have 2 of the town wells are contaminated with PFAS. So if we are potentially going to go and take a large bulk of material that has PFAS and put it in a new spot, are we going to then contaminate other wells in town? I think we do need to know that.
So that's a question really about the land application of
Yeah.
material that has PFAS in it.
And what does it go to?
And where does it go?
Where does it drain?
Right.
And
Okay,
is wherever it's going already contaminated with
Okay.
PFAS or not? Are we really making anything worse?
right, okay. What else? Keith,
So all the testing that's been done on the sediments, it doesn't seem like the nutrients were tested. So I think that's really important because this keeps coming up a lot. Because the nutrients are assumed to be very high based on modeling. You can actually test it and it hasn't been done. So I would like to see more results there
nutrients in the
in
set,
the sediments.
not the water column. but the
Right.
Okay, all right. What else? Yes, Vicky.
So there's been a bunch of boats out and people, it looks like they've been doing some testing over the past months. I'm just curious if they've done any of this, like updated testing or nutrient testing, or what's been happening. I know there's several $100,000 were spent since last year on dam removal and.
They are doing some
ESS.
additional sediments testing, and
Okay.
I can get you more information about that.
Yeah, if we have those results, that may
We
answer
don't
some
have
of
those
people's.
results, we don't
we
have those results yet, but I don't know, I don't think it includes nutrient sampling, that's not my recollection of what that was, but we can look at that right now and let you know.
I have a question about nutrient, I guess it's nutrients, or again, it's not an area where I know very well. But it's the phosphorus in the water. Has that been tested? Is that before and after, or has it been modeled?
Well, I mean,
Is that the same thing? I
it
don't
hasn't
know.
been tested because the assumption is that there is such high phosphorus that is generating the, the growth of all of these plants.
Uh-huh.
So it's almost like it doesn't need to be tested because, but, whether or not it's collecting in the sediments, I think is Keith's question, and that's a different.
Yeah, there's old phosphorus, it's like it accumulates. I mean, my understanding, there used to be orchards more upstream and so all the fertilizer that they were dumping on that probably got into the brook, and then it's just because of the pond, it stays in the pond and accumulates. And stays available for the plants to use. But then I think it was in this report, the consultant did 2 tests of stormwater to get the phosphorus in the water itself, and they concluded that it was so minimal that they didn't think that was the source of excess nutrients in the pond is from stormwater, at least at this point.
Yeah, there was something about upstream, right? Wasn't that where it was up?
I think they were doing it in the pond, actually,
Oh, I
the
see.
outfalls, like off. I
Yeah,
forget,
yeah.
Wright Road or something,
Right.
or Losbrook, I forget.
Keith, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding sort of the point you're making. You're suggesting that it was basically historical nutrient deposits that got trapped in the sediments that are now there, that is kind of the main source.
That's
of-
my top theory at this point. Yeah.
Rather than ongoing sediment
Yeah,
deposition.
stormwater improvements have been made over more recent decades,
Mhm.
so there's a chance that their stormwater coming in from
Mhm.
storm sewer system has been reduced.
Mhm. And so the hypothesis for this, or the kind of the suggestion of this would be, if true, that would suggest that actually dredging would have a better long-term trajectory because it's not really there are not as many new nutrients coming in as has been modeled. Right, if you would like a way to answer that question,
That could be a logical conclusion.
want to make sure we.
Can I pose a question or a comment combination? So I think it makes a very big difference whether we're thinking about limited dredging as it appeared in the 2018 report, or we're thinking of dredging in general. Because my personal opinion, dredging as an option may actually work well, but not as limited dredging, because one of my concerns deals with only a small percentage of the pond that is being dredged, and what happens to the other large percentage. So I guess it's a point of, for further deliberation of dredging, I think we have to be very specific whether we're actually talking about limited dredging or we're weighing dredging as an option, because I think those are two different questions.
What do people think? Any thoughts, any reactions to Paul's comment?
I can also add, just in terms of sediments, I would think that if you do have a lot of sediment, mineral soils coming into the pond, like sands, silts, you will see that layered. And then there's the plant matter that dies, and that becomes more of what we call muck. So you would have like a layered effect if you were to have excess sediments coming in. I don't believe that's the case. We seem to have a thick muck layer, which would indicate to me it's mostly those plants that keep growing and dying, and they're not being overlain by excess sediments coming into the pond.
My observation on that, maybe questioning that, Keith, is in the watershed report, I've got it here somewhere, or maybe I left it at home. There's the bathymetry of the sediment testing they did. And even in the deep part of the ponds, below 15 feet deep, so we're not having vegetation, rooted vegetation growing there, it was like 10 feet of sediment in what probably was an old kettle hole. So I think we talked a little bit about this last time, the dynamics, and I'd be happy to have a.
I think I have to know what we're talking about. We're talking about the option of dredging those two parts of the pond as described in this report, or we're talking more general about dredging. Or maybe we table that for later conversation, because I think they're very different conversations.
My point was just that it seems the sediments depositing throughout the mineral sediment is coming in, being carried in, depositing over the last 100+ years throughout the whole pond.
I can just respond to that. I think the location of that deep hole is right next to the farm field. And so historically, I would think that there was no buffer strip there, and they used to farm right up to the edge, and there was probably a lot of sediment getting into the pond right there from stormwater. But again, we don't, it's a theory.
I just wanna
comment during it or just after?
So I just want to circle back to the question about what is currently being sampled, which is the physical characteristics as well as chemical, but not nutrient. So both upstream and downstream, within the pond and downstream.
So sorry, is that updating any of this report?
It's collecting additional
testing?
information, and yeah, there's some overlap.
And when do you think we'll see those results?
I hope soon. I mean, they're
Okay.
still collecting, so.
Oh, they are, okay.
Yeah.
So picking up on Paul's point about dredging, talking about dredging the whole pond versus dredging part of the pond, are you all thinking about this, when we talk about dredging, the questions about dredging, are you all thinking about it in terms of two different approaches, or are you thinking of just dredging?
Well, I can say, I'm thinking, I mean, I've thought about both. I mean, I'm not sure which is preferable or whether which is doable. I'm also wondering, about that delta where the Neshoba Brook enters in, whether there's something beneficial about having a delta that filters out, things. And I don't know how that works. I mean, would we want to dredge that too? I just don't know. I don't know.
I would say just for the purpose of this information gathering effort, that you just focus on dredging as a technique and not in the actual approach of all persons. Like, it should be separated out, maybe that your questions, if it's a limited dredge, that you have questions about that versus full dredge. Because a lot of what I'm hearing so far is about dredging as an approach. It's not about if we dredge this and we don't dredge that, what would it mean? There's a few questions about that, and there's a few questions that Toby's gathered from your responses to the survey, but in general, a lot of the discussion seems to be just about dredging.
Yeah,
Yes.
but they're two vastly different alternatives. And
Yes.
one extreme dredging the whole, I'm not counseling that we dredge the whole pond, but that's one alternative. Dredging small amounts is another alternative. They're different, and so talking about dredging as an unconnected technique, I'm not sure what benefits it has for this discussion. We have to talk specifically about, what we're talking about.
I agree with that, that we need some specific proposal to react to if we're ultimately going to weigh the multiple benefits.
Yeah.
That we're gonna.
Yes.
We don't need to decide now how many alternatives related to dredging we're going to in the end, run through our criteria. There could be multiple that you all want to explore and think about.
Right, there could be all kinds of
I do
combinations. But a lot of the questions that you're having about dredging, I think would apply, in general, they would apply to both approaches or to multiple approaches, questions about sediment, questions about nutrients, questions about, flow are all can be relevant, whether you dredge the whole thing or part of it or pieces of it. Like, yes, someone's gonna
Yeah, I
hear.
think it was Liz had.
Liz?
Oh, I
Please.
was just, so I think Rachel, you answered what I was thinking is because, I was sort of stuck on the idea of dredging as presented in the 2018 versus the idea of dredging presented more recently, which was a dredge and fill, where you're not actually removing the sediments. But I think you're kind of saying like, okay, you can get into the weeds of understanding what the sediments are and how the impact is later. I think that's what you kind of were just.
Yes,
so
I mean, it's a little confusing because walling off the discussion to just the 2018 dredge document isn't necessarily fair to you because you're familiar with the other options for dredge. So I don't want to block you off from doing that, But if you make a comment in this conversation that's like, I'm only talking about judging the whole thing, you can tell us that and we'll note it in our comment in our recordings, but we're really interested in your questions and your thoughts and your reactions to the comments to the 2018 dredge and to your questions about dredging. What's dredging entail? What are the repercussions? What are the funding questions, methods, whatever? Yes.
Yes, I think one thing you were asked us to do, which was I thought, this is where we stray,
Yeah.
right? And you're going to try to keep on topic, is you asked us to comment on the conclusions of the 2018 report. And to me, reading the 2018 report, dredging seems extremely positive. Like they say it's going to work. They've done testing, they've done sediment testing, they've done water quality testing. They came up with a design. They came up with Giroux Park design. They came up with a boat launch design. They came up with an estimate. I mean, really an incredible amount of design details. Dollars were spent on dredging and it seemed positive and that it was they felt like the design they had come up with was going to be good for over 100 years. That was extraordinary and that was 2018. And to me, it feels like, gosh, if that had come in at $3.5 million, the pond would be dredged today and we'd be testing that. And so it was to me, it was positive. So that's my conclusion. When I read the 2018 report, it's extremely positive and it makes it out to be the only option that really would answer the needs of the town. It kind of went through the Envision Concord criteria of making more recreation, making it accessible, making it connect to what the town's criteria has been. So I thought it was a really if I'm just reading the 2018
Mhm,
report, which is what
right.
you asked us to do,
Right.
it seems extremely positive.
Yeah, and I don't want to contribute to us veering off.
Right, right,
these
right.
either. I
I'm
just
happy
want-
to veer off.
Right,
but-
I just want to recognize that a lot of the questions that are being asked would apply to any dredge approach, whether it's full dredge or a partial dredge or pieces of dredge, or whatever. Mark, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the, I would like to learn more about what you can accomplish by dredging. You know, I assume that there are different purposes that dredging is used for and how those outcomes might be accomplished in the context of things that we might be trying to do in Warner's Pond, like, you know, maintain better water quality or some kind of flow or establish something that we think is going to be stable for a period of time. So I am hoping to learn more about it. I think like Vicky, come away with a fairly positive view of dredging from the 2018 report, but I feel like, you know, that was almost a given because of what it was trying to do, which was, you know, support a plan that kind of assumed that dredging was going to happen or be, you know, be pursued.
I would agree with that. I would say, though, that one thing also struck me was somewhere in the report is that it's not going to solve the problem of the pond. So we're going to have to have other things to be done, even if you were to dredge it. There's not to be continual maintenance and thought about that, et cetera. So that's where those short terms, not solutions, but short-term maintenance things were going to be raised. It seems to me.
I found myself thinking something similar, Bill, and I also thought that, you know, there might even be some phased version of it, depending on what the logistics are that go on, that might, you know, spread out the costs or address certain conditions that were expected to happen over time. So I'm interested, like I said, in learning more about the various techniques in general, so that we could think about how, you know, what they might be applied to in terms of outcomes we were looking for.
I just point out, one of the conclusions in the report, and I was trying to find it, with regards to nutrients, is that the dredging, the limited dredging would not have much of an impact on the overall nutrient inputs into the pond, which that was, although it's a positive report, it's not positive in terms of nutrient control. That's an explicit statement within the report. And that's because the nutrient inputs upstream are large. And it doesn't mean that nutrients won't remove nutrients tied up in the sediments, but the report stated that the nutrient budget would not be terribly impacted by the limited dredging.
That's very curious. That's exactly the question, Paul, I've been struggling with again about testing the water above the pond. Because I can understand where it says in the report that something like, what is it? The average phosphorus load entering the pond is 4,130 kilograms a year. Is that coming from upstream, or is that coming from our own sediment in the pond already? Upstream, okay.
It's upstream.
It is upstream.
But you have to understand that that wasn't ground truth. It's a model. It's based off of a land use classification map.
Okay.
There was no information in the report that said they used any actual samples upstream in the watershed to inform the model.
Okay,
It's 100% modeled. So
so it might be worth.
yeah, I mean, I always come back to modeling's always wrong, but sometimes useful. So if you can't even ground truth it and put some like reality into it, it's kind of useless.
And Bill, no, I don't think anybody's done an analysis of the transfer of nutrients from the sediments into the water. And that's a key missing piece, because the conclusion in the report, as far as not impacting the nutrient budget, may be completely wrong. It may be that the major inputs are from the sediments, and by removing sediments, it's a big benefit, but that's a really open question right now.
Yeah, we need more data.
Sure.
Just back to the thought that the report was, positive on dredging. That was considering how best, what can we do to address issues in the pond, with the assumption that the pond will be there. So it's important to me to recognize this was written before there was anyone conceived of or really evaluated options.
Yeah.
Including the.
Sure, absolutely.
I just have one question, that just kind of checking with you all. The concern about this, about the nutrients, is that important because of the link to vegetative growth in the pond? Is the aquatic weed aspect of it, or is there other reasons why the nutrient load is a concern?
It's one of the primary problems that's identified in all those reports and analysis. That and the sediments,
Is what, sorry, can you explain?
excess nutrients coming
Is
into
it-
the pond is one of the few primary problems
And,
that we have to solve.
and say what the problem, tell me what the problem is.
It's assumed there's excess nutrients coming into the pond, which helps feed the invasive plants
Yeah,
to increase
okay.
their growth and expansion at a rate that's that we see is out of control.
Okay, great, thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
And
Which is why
and just to
sometimes-
go back, and it impacts the sustainability of dredging, right? If,
Well, of any water.
right, well, I
In
think,
terms of weed
Right.
growth,
yeah.
not in
if-
terms of sedimentation, but in,
I mean,
in terms of
Water
I
quality.
mean, I
Water
lived near
quality,
Spy
yeah.
Pond in Belmont for a while. We used to get a pamphlet every year saying, please keep your fertilizer down, because eventually you watershed into Spy Pond and
Mhm.
it's not good for the pond. So I think anywhere you're near water.
Right, it's sort of like, it's a way to
fertilizers.
test if this 100 years is realistic or not, or is it much shorter, is it much longer?
The 100 years was specifically a sediment analysis.
Yeah,
Not the nutrients.
right,
right.
right, okay.
All right, so one more question.
Another aspect is how deep the dredging should go.
Yes.
The report was rather clear that you want to have kind of avoid the invasive plants coming back. You have to go deeper than just taking a certain level away. And understanding that, how deep you have to go and what that means to all other aspects and the cost and so on is an important question.
So I guess just to clarify again, because of Toby's question, are you saying that there's a link between nutrient levels and sedimentation, or are you viewing those as two separate processes? In other words, that sediments flowing into the pond are a separate process than nutrients, the nutrient loading.
I don't see that you can separate them out. I think that the sediments come in with some nutrients, you know, absorbed onto those sediments, those, you know, settle out in the water column. But they're also combined from the standpoint of, you know, you have shallower water elevations and higher nutrients from the aquatic invasives that are now being allowed to grow because it's so shallow that there's all this light that's penetrating and creating just this, you know, cycling effect. And I think it's 8 or 9 feet that it has to be, you know, dredged out, that you don't, or it has to have that depth to, that's, you know, then you don't have that ability for the light to penetrate, you then have to hit those sediments and then create that invasive growth. Or that growth.
What are you saying? It's sediment plus nutrients plus light, like those 3 things are required for the invasives to grow? Like we need all 3 things? Is that why?
Oh,
this
yeah.
works? Yeah, okay.
I try.
I'm just learning.
You need light for everything.
Yeah.
Wondering, and Sven just referred to this, my reading of the plan to dredge went below the depth of existing sediment. Was the underlying native material characterized at all?
So it was characterized, and that information, I think, is in, I don't remember how deep that went.
Every appendix.
I know, I didn't, but it was characterized.
Great.
And it was, you know, mostly fine sands.
So that's reflected in costs.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
You know, but it's like, if you see, there's photos of the borings that are in there, and it's, you know, I mean, well, I'll just say it's mostly fine sands, yeah.
All right, good conversation. I think we have to
Great.
move on to our next item.
So I just want to kind of take a stab at synthesizing a bit. I didn't hear anyone sort of suggesting that the questions that I shared in the presentation, that any of those were like not relevant, right? It seems like we can safely kind of synthesize and add those to our issues list. In terms of kind of issues that have come up today, we talked about the validity of the sediment tests, and I think we learned that those would need to be retested, right? So that's kind of a asked and answered question. There's some question about PFAS, and I think we have different perspectives in the group around how to handle that. So that's something I think we're gonna, continue working through as we go forward, but a desire for consistency across how we deal with this in Concord, right? Obviously, we need to comply with any state regulations, right? But anything beyond that, we want to be consistent, right? Not put higher standards on Warner's Pond than other places, but this is something different in that we're moving material and placing it somewhere else, right? So we just need to think about how to address that. We've heard about, some interest in nutrient testing for sediments. So noting that nutrient testing of the water also upstream, has not been done. So people kind of wondering about the system and how it works in Warner's Pond, about sediment coming in, nutrients coming in, right? How the combination of those things plus light, right, impacts water quality, and therefore what the actual impact across the pond, and in the specific areas as well where dredging might take place would be, right? So how does it impact the system of nutrients coming in and leading to eutrophication? We have a question about full pond and partial dredging, also different options for dredging that we might want to think about. And a phased approach, et cetera. So the depth, et cetera. So I think we've identified some good issues for us to think about it. We'll add those to the issues document. But maybe we want to now get to Keith's presentation. So we're gonna, continue talking about dredging and potential issues, but we'll do so in a few minutes, having had the benefit of Keith sharing some of his thoughts and research into
So
those.
should I stand up there?
So yeah,
Keith, I just want to say a little bit of background for people to know. Keith had reached out to us, just for everyone to know, and asked to do a presentation. We thought that it was perfect opportunity for us right now, since we're doing the dredging. And we'd say the same thing to anybody else in the committee. If you're interested in making a presentation, you feel you have something important, and we'll discuss it at the planning team, and we'll work it out and see whether we can fit it in, given the timeline and whatever we're talking about at that particular meeting. So that's it. So Keith.
I'll try to stand close to the slides here.
Wants to move out of the way a little bit.
We can move.
Maybe so I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
yeah.
point
Next
this
bit.
to something,
Just let me know when you want to switch to that. Actually, would you like me to leave this for you so you can do it? or-
That's fine, I can try that.
Just forward arrows.
Great. Well, Keith, do you want us to wait and have questions at the end of your presentation? Is that the
Oh,
best way?
that, I mean, if that's possible, it might be ideal, just because I know there's a time constraint.
Yeah, you're right.
Good to
That's
just
the point.
go through.
Yeah.
Great, so, for mostly the people online or here in the room who don't know me, my name's Keith Hannon. I'm a professional wetland scientist, and I work for the Army Corps of Engineers in the New England District Office, which you may or may not also know that it is located in Concord, in the Virginia Road down by Hanscom Field. And I'm also the Friends of Warner's Pond representative on the task force. And just a little background about what I do with the Corps. So I work in the Civil Works Planning Division. And so we focus on developing feasibility studies with non-federal sponsors or partners to fix or look at solving problems they're dealing with, including ecosystem restoration, coastal storm risk mitigation, flood risk, and dredging projects. And it's been interesting talking with Jeff, who works for Audubon. Last year, I was working with Audubon on the beneficial reuse project to reuse dredge material to restore nesting habitat for an endangered bird in Maine on an island that's owned by Audubon. So it's an interesting connection there with the task force. And that's not advanced.
So we need to go down, make sure, down.
Gotcha.
Okay. So you can see your slides.
Thank you. What's going on? Showing, but we'll just make it work, I guess, here. So just a little bit of a quick background, brief summary. So starting in around August 22, where were we? in terms of just the dredging project and the bid that was received. But at that point, all the necessary and required permits for dredging were obtained and in hand. We only had one dredging contractor submit, the only documented bid that came in at $9.5 million. And so that high bid led to, putting a halt to the dredging plan. Kicking off a new alternative to look into dam removal and ultimately the creation of this task force. So I'll just, I just put this in here as a, okay, a way to orient everyone, just for, I'll come back to this later on. But here's Warner's Pond, and then here's the prison. This is Scout Island, this is Calm Ave and Lawsbrook Road, and this is the prison fields, and we'll talk about that in a bit.
Keith,
So real quick,
Keith, I'm really sorry. We can't see your laser pointer. Can you verbally describe where the prison fields are? Because I'm not 100% sure. Or use the mouse. The mouse works.
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if you see the arrow there or the pointer.
Yes. Okay, there. Sorry. I think, okay, thank you.
No problem. So, just a really quick rundown of dredging. So there's really two options available. The first is hydraulic dredging. And that YouTube link is what I had asked also to be sent to the task force members to watch in advance. I thought that was really helpful. It shows you all the primary four options for dewatering dredge materials, especially from a hydraulic dredging operation. So here's a picture of it in action. There's a dredge floating in the water there, connected to a pipeline, and it pushes the dredge material onto the shore or some other location. And it's important to keep in mind that hydraulic dredge material is 80% water. So you're really just moving water with some sediment in it. But this link is available for everyone. Hopefully we can post this to the task force website and then everyone can see what we're talking about. The other option is mechanical dredging, where you're just using an excavator or a clamshell scoop to literally just pick it up by the shovelful kind of, and then dump it into, in this case, showing a barge. But we were talking about hydraulic dredging. That was the plan in Warner's Pond. Okay, thank you. So then, Liz, this shows specifically, this is from the 2018 report. So the green area here shown right there is the designated or selected dewatering area in the prison field. And this just shows the preliminary assessment that was done to show how you would truck material from the dewatering area to the minimum security prison, which I'll probably just refer to as the prison through this presentation. So yeah, those are the two things there I wanted to focus on. Go ahead. And then in May 2022, this is a brief summary of just the actual the dredging plan. So again, we had all the permits from the NRC and Mass DEP. So the plan was to dredge 35,750 cubic yards from the north and south dredge areas, which are shown there in the plan. Dewater the dredge material in the farm field that was shown in the green area on the previous slide. And then dispose of the dredge material on the minimum security prison property north of the Rotary. Some other interesting parts of this plan was to build a 1 acre wetland shelf. So that was going to be about 4,400 cubic yards placed on the north side of Scout Island. And then also to improve the existing Calm Ave boat launch. So quick rundown outline for where we're headed with this presentation. So I'll just walk everyone through the RFP, the request for a proposal that was developed, the dredging plan set, the details of the one bid that was received, and an alternative dredging plan that was not considered. So here's the Warner's Pond Task Force. All this information I'm going to present is available to view right now. It's on the website. So I just circled the first document I look at is right there. It's the contract documents and specifications link. This is the first page. It's dated August 8th, 2022. And just wanted to also point out, so between August 10th and 16th, there were 17 dredging companies interested in bidding on this project. and they received a copy of the RFP. And so it's really micro text, so I just pulled out the names so you can read them better here. Sorry if you guys can't see it. So within the RFP document, there is a bid sheet, a bid form. So it just has a series of line items that they would like the contractors to bid on. So I just highlighted some key areas here. Line 7 is they want you to bid on what it would cost to dredge 5,000 cubic yards from the north dredge area. Line item 8 is what would it cost to dredge 30,800 cubic yards from the south dredge area. Those were in the plan. And so it goes on from there. There's the wetland shelf, processing dredge material. That's what would it cost if you water it. And then also line 12 is transport disposal of the contaminated dredge material. So there's a small area of that has been determined to be contaminated. Yeah. And so within this RFP document, again, there's a section on prison access restrictions. So this is the first page of that. The title of it there is circled. It's on page 159. This is part 1. And I just circled 103C because it doesn't fit on the first page. But it says no person convicted of a felony shall be employed on this project without the express permission of the commissioner of the correction or the commissioner of correction or the institution superintendent. Slide. So this continues. There's additional prison access restrictions. Section 1.05 shows that in section 105B, the project manager will coordinate security checks, and this actually just means background checks on all the employees who are going to be entering the prison grounds, who are working for the dredge contractor. 106B2, again, it says if you're convicted of a felony, you cannot enter the prison property. And then also curious, 106B4, if you're the dredge contractor, employees cannot wear jeans. It specifically says dungarees when entering the prison. So you can't wear jeans if you're going to be driving a truck onto the prison grounds. Continuing on, there's photo ID checks for each dredging employee every time they enter the prison. There's going to be vehicle searches. You'll be subject to those. There's additional inspections on your tools, your tool inventory, tool inspections. So this is going to be repeated every time someone leaves and comes back. So overall, there are 19 pages of prison access restrictions included in the RFP. In addition to that, I just wanted to call out the dewatering section on page 187. It just says the contractor may select to complete dewatering work by methods including, but not limited to the following. And geotextile tubes was listed. In that video, it does show the geotextile tubes being used. I don't know if that was clear, but hopefully it was, just to give you a sense of what it is. And I've seen projects where that can get kind of expensive, so I just threw out there, are they the cheapest option for Warner's Pond? So moving on to the dredging plan set that went with the RFP, it's available here on the task force website. This is the first page. It's dated August 2nd. And so I just pulled out a couple sections of plans. This is showing the wetland shelf plan. So approximately 4,500 cubic yards are going to be placed just north of Scout Island. This is an example of in-pond placement, which I'll come back to. And then there was an updated truck route from the dewatering area to the prison. So I just thought it was interesting that still is the plan as of August 2022. Real quick, just additional details. You can go to the next page. So that there was a drawing for the Comm Ave boat launch. There was going to be an improved boat launch on Comm Ave. It's just a simple timber structure filled with some 3/4 inch stone. This was not built because it was linked to the dredging project. So, and then the next document I want to review is the RFP addendum number 1. Go ahead. That's available here on the task force website, circled in red. And this is the first page. Essentially, it's dated August 29th, 2022. So the point of the RFP was to change some original wording in the RFP and to answer questions received from the pre-bid conference. So there were 5 dredging contractors who attended a pre-bid conference on August 15th. Next slide. So the big question that was asked that I wanted to highlight, and I'll just read it here quickly, is they asked, trucks are only allowed to enter the facility, which is the prison, 3 times each day, and they may not all be during standard working hours. And there was nothing to say how many trucks can enter at a time. Can we get this clarified? The response is the prison will open the facility for 3 one-hour windows each day between the hours of 8 to 3, during which trucks may enter, leave the prison facility grounds. Up to 3 trucks may be on the prison facility grounds at any one time. And then the last sentence says the contractor may elect to dispose of the material at a licensed disposal facility. So I just want to highlight this and make it very clear. This is not the prison. The contractor has been given the option to bring the material to wherever they want. So that's just important to call out. And so in the addendum, they updated the bid form. So bid items number 11 and 12 have been changed. So number 11 used to be the wetland shelf. It's now transportation and disposal of 43,200 tons of non-contaminated materials to a licensed disposal facility. Again, that is not the prison. And then number 12 is 3,200 cubic yards are now going to a sediment disposal area, which is the prison. So that's a tenth of what was the original plan. Only 3,200 cubic yards were going to be brought to the prison, and they bid on that. So next slide. So this is the updated bid form in the addendum. This is items 11 and 12 that I highlighted there. Very hard to read. And then we'll just look at the details of the bid received, which is available on the task force website, circled in red. And so these are the key areas that we'll go into a little bit more on the next slide. That it's really hard to read, but ultimately you can see the price comes in here at $9.5 million. I'll show you why that is. So bid item number 1, can we move this over to the bird? Or minimize it maybe? Great, thank you. So bid item number 1 is for temporary erosion and sediment controls. That came in at 1.4 million. That seems really high to me. The ComAv boat access improvements, the improved boat launch, I just wanted to give people a quick understanding. That was coming in at $13,000. So unfortunately, we lost that with this project, but it would be something to consider to actually build. It's pretty cheap. Item number 8, dredging the south dredge area came in at $25 a cubic yard for $770,000. The processing dredge materials, which includes the use of geotubes, was almost $1 million. And then item number 11, transport and disposal of non-contaminated materials to a licensed disposal location was $4.5 million. That alone is larger than the dredging budget we had for this project. So next slide. So just a quick review. So there was 17 contractors originally interested in this project. 5 attended the pre-bid conference and only 1 bid was received. So just a general question is, were all but one of these contractors interested in bid, or were they actually dissuaded from bidding on the project because of all the long list of prison access restrictions, which would have made their work really challenging? And then I also just generally want to know what facility was Charter planning to bring the material to? And then just for context, bringing the material to the prison had no added cost. There was no dumping fee. So it would have been free to bring it there, just as a comparison. And then alternative plans not pursued. I'll just run through this quickly. We did receive an email to the task force. There was an alternative site located by the prison. They offered this location here, south of Route 2, just in between the rail trail and Route 2, as a different location that wasn't on the grounds of the actual prison facility. And that email came in February 26th when we were just starting the task force. So if you were to actually pump the material there from a hydraulic dredge, that would eliminate the high transportation costs, and we could significantly reduce the dewatering costs associated with trying to transport that material via trucks. see, and then also, yeah, so with this location in mind, and then trying to figure out how to use in-pond placement more, which has no added cost. This is like a really good combo to pursue as like a different plan. So if you really want to get the cost down, there's something likely here that hasn't been pursued. And then, so this is, I just highlighted these two parcels in red, so that top one is the one we were just talking about, the second property owned by the MCI. And this other one is kind of in the Junction Village parcel, which back in 2022 was still sitting vacant. I just wonder, it's town-owned lands. Could we have put some of the dredge material there, just pump it over Comm Ave very easily, and just get as much, just figure out a different plan with what we have available surrounding the pond, because that's going to be the cheapest solution. And that also is not looked at. Next slide. So real quickly, so just from my access to projects at the Corps, there was an example project done by them in 2014 in Milford, Mass. So the goal was to deepen, restore an impounded pond, utilize in-pond placement. 100% of the material stayed in the pond, and they used it to create new riparian wetland habitat and islands with dredge material in the pond. So they dredged 246,000 cubic yards over an area of 17 acres. And that cost $4 million back in 2014. And it's interesting to note that the contractor who did that was a subcontractor. Sorry, the contractor who won the award subcontracted out to Charter, and that's Charter is the company who bid on the Warner's Pond project.
It was 14, yeah?
2014.
Okay.
So just, you can just see here is the plan. I highlighted the boundary of the pond in blue. The gray area is the dredged area. 17 acres was gonna go all to this hatch area in the raised island area, but that's all in pond placement. Okay. This is the copy of the bid sheet. You can see circle in red here. These are the rates. This is about $11.40 per cubic yard. And this is the quantities. That's cubic yards. So that totals 246,000. And this is the bid, the winning bid that was awarded is about $4 million. So if you were to combine this project with what we received from Charter, you can begin to just see there's potentially other options here that were not looked at. So if you were to utilize in-pond placement as much as possible, especially in the western cove of Warner's Pond, it's so shallow right now. If you were to remove the dam, this whole area would essentially become upland, which is my assessment. This all needs to be modeled, but maybe I should say it might be upland. So if you eliminate placing the material in an upland disposal location, with the plan of then trucking it away, if you just use the hydraulic dredge pipeline, you know, that it reduces the, coupled with in-pond placement, that reduces the amount we need to dewater, so that becomes cheaper. And then I'll just call out a couple of numbers that Charter provided in their bid. So for the mobilization, demobilization, which is what it costs to bring a dredge, set it up, they said it was gonna be $900,000. This is a known thing for dredging. Demob is quite expensive. But if you were to try to elevate or increase the 2014 rate, accounting for inflation and just some of these conversations with people in the Corps who might have some opinions about this, if you get up to about $20 a cubic yard today, that seems to be a more accurate rate. And then, but if we look at 2022 Charter's bid, they offer to do it at $25 a cubic yard. So you kind of have a range to compare. And then this is the last slide. So I just broke down some comparisons to try to compare apples to apples. So this is the MOB demob on line 1, 900,000. But then if you do different alternatives, here's 35,000 cubic yards dredged. And then I just picked a number, a round number, 100,000 cubic yards, and you just compare the prices. and the rates, so 35,000 at $25 a cubic yard is 875,000. That's what, if you were to do all in pond placement and not transport this material anywhere, no dewatering, you could dredge the plan that we had permitted for $875,000 using Charter's own proposed bid rate. Scenario B is if you were to increase the dredging amount to 100,000 cubic yards and you somehow were able to do all that without dewatering, that would come in, again, using Charter's $25 per cubic yard, that would be 2.5 million. And then if you were to do a somewhat a lower range, the $20 a cubic yard, obviously it'd be 2 million. But you know, if you have multiple bidders, you'll get a range of prices to select from and choose. So I think this is a fairly accurate range between showing down here, if you add in the MOB, DMOB, you've got a range of about 2.9 to 3.4 million doing 100,000 cubic yards of material. And it's just important to point out that all these numbers are lower or within budget that we had to dredge 35,000 cubic yards. So just a lot to explore and discuss and figure out, you know, what else might be possible.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
All right, should we go resume our places at the table?
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you so much, Keith. So I think we wanted to open it up to the group and just, first I'll give you a chance to ask questions of Keith, or if they're clarifying questions, raised by his presentation that you'd like to kind of ask the group or put on the table. Want to give them time for that. And likewise, if there are kind of issues based on what we heard that we want to add to our list of issues to look at with respect to dredging, want to hear those as well.
Well, it's kind of interesting. We were talking about dredging, we were talking about dredging the whole pond. We were talking about dredging 35,000 cubic yards, and interesting presentation that maybe we could dredge more of the pond at a lesser price if we found a way to put it within the pond. You know, so that might be the answer to that question.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think,
Oh,
go ahead, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, Keith, a really amazing, thorough presentation, very enlightening. Thank you for doing that. I think the ability to dredge more for a lower price, I mean, it rings a lot of bells for me. But I'm just wondering, that 100,000 cubic yard number, was that with any specific areas in mind, or was that just sort of an example of volume?
Yeah, just a quick estimate volume, just I thought might be feasible. I don't know if 200,000 would even be feasible, but I think a lot of that would have to be determined based on data and engineering. So yeah, it's just a back of the envelope kind of what if concept.
Can you convert that to acreage for me, versus 30,000 cubic yards versus 100,000?
It depends how deep you go, so unfortunately we can't. But I will say that the Milford project was 17 acres and they did 200,000 cubic yards, but I don't know exactly how deep they went.
Thank you.
There was a question about depth. And
I'm about to see Sven's hand, so we'll get to you in a second. Go ahead, Mark.
under the basic, let's start with what was responded to. The 35,000 cubic yards, I understand, but I wasn't really clear on what kind of depths we were talking about. And since it seems like creating deeper areas is really important to controlling the vegetation, what would that look like, and what might, 100,000 cubic yards accomplish in terms of making the pond deeper, if you know?
Keith, can you offer any comments on that?
I would like to think you could reach the target depths that we're going for 35,000 cubic yards and then just basically triple the acreage. Which I think they were going, I don't remember exactly, but maybe 12 feet was the plan. So if you multiply the area, which we have, I think, which I actually don't remember what the dredged area was. Maybe.
Right, okay, yeah, but that's where you were
6
gonna
acres or
back of the
something.
envelope, put it, right? Yeah. Sven, go ahead.
So, just where would you put the 100,000 cubic feet of material? What would that change to how the pond looks today, and what happens with the nutrients that are in there? Are they then continue to seek in the water body again? So where do you put this?
So in the Western Cove, if you've ever been over there.
Yeah.
It's so shallow. I think you could put a lot of it there, but the idea is if you're gonna put it in an upland area to dewater, you just reduce the amount you need to dewater upland, because that's more expensive. So it's hard to know. I think this would have to be really looked at closely based on surveys.
So you would eliminate that shallow part?
Well,
or-
it could be a series of wetland hummocks. I mean, I don't know how much material you can put in there.
And the nutrients, what nutrients, what happens with that? They're typically not staying in that, they're with the rain and everything, are they washed into the pond again?
They could be, but I think I'm not, I don't have a great answer for that right now.
Great, so I see Liz's hand, and then we'll go to Malcolm and yeah, go ahead, Liz. And Bruce as well, okay. Liz, you're on mute.
Thank you. Just for my own understanding, when you're talking about using it within the pond, is there a difference between the idea in the 2023 around dredge and fill and what you're talking about? Is it like a matter of mechanics, or is it really similar thing? I don't know if that makes sense. Were you not able to hear me?
Not sure.
Did you get the question?
I didn't
Yeah.
get the question.
No,
Okay,
sorry, I
again,
didn't follow.
yeah.
All right. So my question was, is there a difference between the idea of dredging and filling the pond that was talked about in the 2023 alternatives and this? Is it like just a mechanical difference, or is it a different idea, the idea of using it back in the pond?
Right.
No, I think
it's
it's the same idea.
Okay,
Right.
great, thank you.
Same concept.
Same
Yeah,
concept.
same
In a
concept.
report that we haven't
Yeah.
looked at.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
slightly,
Yeah.
yeah, just a
Yeah,
slightly.
Well, I'm just trying to look like what you're talking about.
right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, so let's go to Sven next.
Yeah, I was already.
Oh, sorry, you already went. I mean, sorry, Malcolm is next.
Yeah,
The others.
I like the idea, but I'm curious, in a way following up to Sven. If we take even 35 or 45, whatever the original thing was, the water is very shallow. So we would we essentially be completely changing the nature of the pond by redepositing it within? I mean, I think that's I'm not sure that I mind that much, but I think it's a huge question because so much is made, so much palaver is the word that I think of, and I'm sure that's not the right word, but about the open area of the pond and everything. So if we're gonna shut down a large section of the open area of the pond, is that a fair trade-off?
Well, it's so shallow now, even with all the water we've had, in last summer, you couldn't paddle in there. And then if you consider that and the alternative we're now comparing is dam removal, I think that whole area beyond that whole area is gonna change completely anyways. So it's like a compromise.
That's fair.
Yeah, Bruce, go ahead.
So I guess there's a couple of questions. So the first one is sort of, would you need to do an environmental impact study for birds and any other wildlife that uses that shallow portion of the pond? And then the second is, as this material is being pumped out, especially if you're creating deeper material,
the possibility of any historical artifacts that could come out? Is there a way of entrapping that so that you could see what's coming out from over 100 years worth of silt buildup? And I think that that's something, like when you think about historic impact, we have to sort of take into consideration because, you know, within the state of Massachusetts, the minute a bone shows up, you're dead, you're stopped. You're dead, you're stopped, and it just costs you more money than buy. Especially because now it's an underground and underwater archaeological site. So it's like really thinking about that as sort of going forward and looking at those kinds of impacts. But I think I'm more interested overall is really looking at sort of the impact of wildlife. Especially when I heard people talking about the birds and that they're all being out and that birds do nest there probably and turtles and other small.
So you'd have to go through the permitting process and it'll be reviewed and consulted with tribes, hopefully, so.
But for both scenarios, like you're saying, with dam removal, you'd be affecting.
So you're still, right, you're still doing it, no matter how you look at it, you're still doing it, so it's just a matter of,
You have to do it both ways.
right.
So I have a question about the prison land that up on the corner by Route 2 behind Commonwealth near the Rotary. Are you suggesting, Keith, that would be the deposit site of the material? And would that be large enough to hold, say, let's say, for example, 100,000 acres? Would that one spot be able, I mean, I guess you can build up as high as you can, but.
Right, yeah, I guess it depends on what I don't know if Jeff's still on, but I don't know, it depends on what the prison's willing to take.
We have to design, I mean, this isn't the design solution yet.
Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, two elements. One, back to the placement, when the shelf was designed, what was the permitting response to that? Are there thresholds, try to stay below, et cetera?
So that's a great question. And I don't think that there were, you know, so it was basically taking open water and creating bordering vegetated wetlands. So if you went the other way and, you know, destroyed bordering vegetated wetland, which is the highest value type of wetlands, then I think you would have a problem. But I don't think that there would be an issue with creating, you know, as many, you know, as much area as you wanted to for, you know, doing this wetland shelf creation, right?
Okay, thanks. And then I think it's creative to think of other locations on the prison land that wouldn't be burdened with the, you know, the security requirements. But it occurs to me, looking at the map around the Rotary, that a lot of stuff will be in play here in the next 15 or 20 years, including realignment of that Rotary, and there may be resistance to literally mucking up that.
Yeah.
But there's several acres there too.
Well, it's gonna be mostly sand, so if it's right next to Route 2, maybe we could sell it.
Yeah.
I think that's, you know, the usefulness as a construction material for roadway work is a really good question because obviously it could have some value.
Is it mostly sand? Probably mostly, isn't it just that, isn't it the decomposed silt from vegetation?
So I think it's been characterized as something like 80% or so sand. And I'm assuming the rest is some combination of silts and organic mucky material.
Yeah.
So the muck will decompose over time relatively quickly as soon as it's oxygenated.
Okay.
I think it is important to look into that question, you know, but this, you know, it is fine sands, which are not typically, you know, good for construction materials. It's mixed in, it's a mucky, you know, substrate. If you look at those photos of the borings, it's quite, you know, mucky. And we did look at whether it could be used to fill the cooling pond. I think it was the cooling pond at Starmet.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that was an idea, just to see if they would just take it.
Yeah.
And the engineer, you know, was provided with the sediment sampling analysis and I talked to, you know, he said, no, it's pond muck, was basically.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so Sven, I'm gonna go to you, then I wanna kind of take a stab at sort of synthesizing something and clarifying something, but go ahead.
Just, I think it appears to me is that more and more, at least for the dredging, comes down to what's in the sediment. So is there anything we need to be concerned about? So how quickly or how much is the effort for you to redo sediment sampling and testing? And test for, let's say, the newest standards from whatever you have till PFAS, so just to get the full understanding, what is actually in there? That we know in the end, when this stuff needs to be placed somewhere, do we have to comply with certain stuff or not?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I would assume that you are going to have fairly similar characterization of the sediments, that there hasn't been any major,
But
No,
PFAS
contamin-
was not measurable at that
Right.
time, for example.
That's a
Now
good-
we
that's a
can
good
measure
question.
PFAS.
right? That's, I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can they test the material they just put out recently for some of this? It's a
Right.
question.
I mean, we don't have that as a contract item for them to do. I don't even know how. I mean, I know it's being looked at from a water supply standpoint, but water is being tested. I'm not sure about the ability to even test.
So we
it.
can't test our sediment for PFAS.
I don't know. I don't know.
Oh,
I'm not sure.
We should know that.
It's
Okay, so I wanna take a stab at sort of, just checking with the group. So I think kind of what I'm taking from this, and I wanna test this with you all. It seems like, you know, based on what we've been talking about today, the interest in exploring ways to reduce costs of dredging. There's some version of an alternative that we're gonna wanna look closely at, which is basically different ways to structure dredging in a way that is, you know, option one, like similar to what the 2022 bid was, but kind of does some key differences, like maybe changing the dewatering location, maybe looking at different, you know, ways to decrease the cost of where the final placement is, right? Different versions of a limited dredging project aligned with what we've talked about in 2018 to reduce costs. And we've named some clear issues that we want to address around that are unanswered questions. What I'm also hearing, and I want to test with you all, is the potential for an additional option, which is a more substantial dredging option, right? That would involve, you know, larger, talk about whole pond, we've talked about 100,000 acres, that something that would be very different, right? From what was talked about in the 2018 report, could involve in-pond placement, right? And I want to just test really two questions. Like, first of all, am I right that this is something that you all think we want to explore more on? And then I think my next question is like, there are, you know, a lot of unanswered questions, and I think understandably, right, about what this actually would look like, the impacts, and what do we think about how to answer those, right? Is it feasible? How would we? And I don't know the answer to that question, right? So anyway, I want to first test, is what I'm saying accurate? And then second, like, are there thoughts about how they answer the really important open questions about a more substantial dredge as an option? Yeah, Vicky, go ahead.
Yeah, so, and I don't know, I would love to see a big dredge, but
Yeah.
if that sounds so interesting, but in the report itself, and this is people who know more about this than me, is it just says that leaving the contaminated material, oh no, it says, sorry, it may not be necessary to dredge the entire pond to achieve a satisfactory level of plant control.
Right,
And the areas not in the dredge area are actually part of the main channel, and so they're outside of the path of incoming sediment. So it depends what we're trying to control. If we're trying to control sediment and plants, it sounds like we don't have to actually add a lot of area. So I don't know if it's 35,000 or 50,000 or 100,000, but it should be focused on what our desired outcome wants to be, which is plant control, I think, and sediment control.
As
Paul
well as
goes in,
all
yeah.
the other issues that you all talked about what's. Right?
Yeah,
That's really what you're getting at, yeah.
Paul, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think that's a good point, Vicky, but I think plant control is only one component of the ecological improvement. And I think that's probably a limited dredging, got deeper areas to take care of the immediate plant problems. But if we want a more permanent, sustainable solution, especially nutrient control, I think it's prudent to consider a larger dredge. Because I think it takes a lot of questions off the table on the limited dredge, and it probably has a larger impact. You know, it's a question of what we can afford. But if Keith's analysis is right, then I think we could do a lot more sustainable, beneficial dredging. You know, that would have a more permanent solution. We wouldn't worry about infill, and we wouldn't worry about, you know, limited impacts in the pond. So I would vote for considering that, Toby. I'm not sure it will take us, but I think we should do it.
Malcolm, go ahead.
Can I just, as a point of information, really, are we going to talk about the 2023
Yes,
report?
that's
Yeah.
next,
Okay.
next meeting.
So that-
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
So going back to your question about
Yeah.
how,
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the next question is like this, there's obviously been a lot of analysis on the 2018 report. Money paid to do that, right? This maybe is a question, partly for Julia, right? Because we do have some, support available to look into alternatives, right? But what I'll ask you, I'll ask others, people have thought about what would be a good way to kind of flesh out some of the details of this.
I mean, I think that, the current consultant that we have under contract has up to 5 additional alternatives that can be considered.
Mhm.
So if there are options that can be, kind of formulated and provided, that might be one of them.
Mhm. And what kind of guidance would they need from us for that to kind of be enough for them, right? I mean, to do an analysis, right? To what extent do we need to narrow it down?
I think there needs to be some pretty good guidance.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, because what I'm hearing so far is a lot of variety.
right.
in terms of
Theoretical
the
idea.
amounts and the
Yeah.
loca-
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
would the, can I just ask,
Yeah.
dealing with the consultant, the engineering firm that you have now, would they be able to help with, costing out the various alternative pieces? to
On
like
a
test and-
conceptual level, 'cause
Okay.
they won't have any design that
Right, but in
accompanies
terms,
it, but there's,
okay.
so there's a conceptual cost estimate that can be.
Okay. All right, so I think we'll leave this
Just one further
conversation.
thought, would it make any sense to try and design give them the mandate of coming up with a concept that fits into the sort of previous budget that was envisioned for dredging, to see answer the question, how far might that money go in today's world?
So that's actually exactly what we did with the modified dredging and maybe formulating these additional alternatives to consider maybe that should wait until after the 2023
Yes, yeah,
analysis
yeah.
review.
Yeah,
Because they
Yeah.
basically took that $3 million cost estimate and backed into it to develop the modified dredging.
it seems from Keith's proposal that the dewatering, right? Did you say that the dewatering was really a large proportion of the cost?
Yeah.
Or,
Well, yeah, if you're using geotubes and what they were bidding on, it was about $960,000, so.
So, and I will just point out that open discharge was the original concept. And based on the constraints that, that land is farmed. And so based on the constraints of impact to the farm fields and timing, it's a faster methodology, as I'm sure you know, to use the geotubes. And so that's why that approach was selected, because the open discharge, the timing didn't work.
Keith, did you have another point you wanted to make?
Well, I just was gonna build off of what Mark was suggesting. I think it sounded like you were looking to see just like another alternative, but I'm thinking get as many alternatives as you can for dredging at a conceptual level, different iterations of different ideas. I think we need more than just one additional idea.
Got it, okay.
So there's
Yeah.
up to 5 that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
consultant
okay.
will-
and it does seem that a lot of the questions that you've had about the 2018 report in terms of dredging and methodology and nutrients and sediments, they still really apply to any dredge approach that you take, right? And I think it's important to keep those in mind and kind of keep them going as you sort through kind of different variations on the theme. Maybe some of those questions go away, maybe, other questions get added. But it doesn't seem to me from what you talked about that looking at more alternatives, dredging changes really anything about the underlying questions that you've raised.
It seems to me that if the emergent vegetation is a real nuisance issue for recreation, aesthetics, whatnot, that minimizing that 1 to 3 foot zone or whatever the zone that folks would say is, you know, accommodates those plants is the design standard, right? So, I mean, an aggressive dredging would be deepen as much as we can and to save cost using them in the pond, but it seems like if these incremental, like this plan only had certain sections and it was leaving a lot of the pond still within that nuisance plan zone.
Right.
It's just weighing against some of the issues that Bruce raised as well, right?
That's gonna be anywhere, you dig
Yeah.
one chunk of stuff under the sediment, and that's gonna be. you
But
know,
also the ecosystem aspects.
the next meeting, I look forward to.
All right,
Advocating
so I wanna
Let me
just,
turn-
okay, there's the last comment that we need to move on for time. Go ahead, Paul. Sorry. Yeah.
I just want to return to an important point that came up earlier, I think. The question of the impact of sediments on nutrients, which I think the 2018 report was kind of equivocal on. I think if there was one piece of information that consultant could help us on, Delia, on the technical side would be to look at the transfer of nutrients from the sediments to the water column. So that would allow us to say if we remove more sediments, it's going to help the nutrient situation even more. We can't say that now because it's a big question mark. So I think that little piece of research, which I don't think is difficult to do, it's a model. But I think there's some good models which could show that what removal of nutrient-laden sediment would help on the water quality. I think so the more you remove, the better the water quality. That's a hypothesis, and they should look into that, I think.
Great, thanks, Paul. So I want to just move us to our next agenda item, and we're gonna move through this quickly, and then one purpose just honestly is to just orient you to these documents. We don't actually need to really discuss them today, but we want you to have them. We want to put them in, the record of the meeting with the public, so we can put these on our website, right, and get some comments on them. So there are really these two documents that we sent to you. One is the issue identification document, which basically tracks key issues that have come up in our meeting so far that are potentially areas of research for work groups, maybe for expert consultants, right? You can think about who to deploy on these. We'll add to that document based on what we talked about today, okay? And this is a running working document that we're going to continuously update. So we want to make sure you see that. We welcome written comments to the facilitation team on that. We can't give those out to the full group, open meeting law, okay? And then likewise, we took a stab at kind of updating the Envision Concord criteria and giving a little more clarity based on some of the written feedback that we received, right, from individual task force members. And likewise, providing a little more clarity on how it can be used, but helping we kind of envision what role this criteria will play and what role it won't play. Because I think we want to be clear, like, it's not going to decide the issue for you. It's a way to help us discuss the issues.
And it's not a checklist, it's a matrix.
Yes.
It's a.
Not yes or no.
Right, it's a thought process.
Right. So we've kind of reorganized that, tried to kind of streamline it a little bit, and we really welcome feedback on that, right? And that was based on what we heard at the last meeting, the input that we got, and sort of our thinking about how to make this as streamlined as possible.
Right.
Is there anything else we need to add on those for today, Rachel? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
They're documents to have and think about it and look at and give us comments as you come up with them.
Yeah.
Right.
So the next piece is kind of moving into well, first we want to talk a little bit about some potential work groups and a site visit. So I'll hand it over to you to key those up.
Right, so the first things that we'd like a work group to volunteer to prepare a brief primer on the 2023 alternatives analysis. Does anyone have any interest in being part of that work group?
So,
This would be similar
yeah,
to
just a little bit,
the-
next meeting in 2 weeks, we're
Right.
gonna talk about the 2023 report,
2023.
just like we talked about the 2018
Right.
report. We thought it would be useful to have a couple of people tee that conversation up for the group, to kind of help highlight key issues, name some issues for discussion, right? Not like the extent of what Keith did today.
Right.
Set the
Yeah,
bar.
you're right, 'cause we didn't do that for the 2018.
Right,
But we're thinking that it might be helpful for the 2023s. You've come this far, you've got a lot of information on your belts. It could be helpful to have a couple of task force or 3, you know, or 4 members dig into the 2023 because you've got a lot more context to use when you review that. It could be helpful to the rest of the group. It's your call. We can do it the same way that we.
right, we can do another survey if you want, yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, are you going to do a survey?
We can, yeah,
We
I
can-
mean,
I
we
thought
do
that was
whatever-
actually quite helpful.
Really like the survey.
You like the survey?
And maybe, yeah, helps for framing, thinking about it a lot.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll do a survey.
We'll do a
Yeah.
survey, problem solved.
Great.
The other
Well,
thing
let
is.
me ask, I shouldn't do this. I mean, we're strong enough, I think we're strong enough now, I'm not saying we have to, but I wonder if there's any interest in inviting EA in to talk to us about that, the consultants who wrote the report. I mean, I think we've come a long way. I think we could ask tough questions if we had questions, but I don't know, what do you think? No, I don't see a lot of enthusiasm for it.
I just feel like we've heard from them so much. It's
You
nice.
haven't,
that
you haven't
this
had a
group is-
chance, you haven't had a chance
Okay.
in a small group like this to really, like we have with everybody else, we've had remarkable conversations. This would be a chance to really hone in on that.
I have a little fear with, I think it's a great idea because I fear we're developing a long list of questions. And there are questions that have been answered in some of these documents that are the information at hand.
Right,
And it's hard for us to all keep it in our heads and say, is that this or is that that? And some questions we could have answered in the room, or maybe we could all get to a point where it's like, I think we kind of have the answer on that one. I think in 2 months, looking in 6 months, I fear we've still got a long list of questions that we've set for ourselves and we're not figuring out a way how to answer those questions. So I love the idea of, for that or any of these other questions, to tee up some
Right.
folks we feel are, able to provide some answers.
so one option is we could do the survey and then do it with the deadline, so that we can share that with the EA in advance, and they can come and try to proactively address what they can.
I guess I'm just wondering, like, what kind of question would you want to ask them?
I have no idea. I have to read the report. I haven't looked at it since we started this up again.
I also wonder if we could just send them our we do have a long list of questions. I'm guessing half of them they could answer, half of them probably we need to find other ways to answer. But maybe we send them those questions and say, you are the technical expert on a bunch of this stuff. Can you answer these for the task force? And then we can have time. What I like about what we're doing is that there's time for us to just.
Oh, yeah,
talk to
absolutely.
each
Yeah, I can
other
see
and-
making the presentation
Yeah,
as
yeah.
answering questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
I do want the answers, but I wonder if there's another way to get them.
Would you want to do that sooner or wait until after you have the chance to look at the 2023 again?
Jeff had a comment.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Just also sensing a sort of a skepticism or a feeling that EA somehow has a dog in the fight, where we have this document from ESS and we're not questioning ESS's conclusions. So, yep, they provide a professional report. So anyways, I just hope we all.
Well, just to clarify, EA purchased ESS.
They're the same
Okay,
company.
so.
No, I don't think that's correct. ESS was purchased by TRC. They're not the same firm.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know.
if that's true, my apologies.
I mean,
hopefully-
do we want to bring them in the next
Yeah,
meeting? I think is what I was.
I don't see a lot of
I think it's
groundswell
sounding
support yet.
like maybe it's really good that the seed was planted and you have time to think about it, but the next one is coming up rather quickly. So maybe focus on the 2023, we'll survey you, and maybe we'll survey you on that very question. Again, you'll have a little more time to think about it after looking at the
Yeah.
2023, and
Yeah,
maybe
good idea.
we'll get more of a response about what to ask or who to ask, right? Because you're not limited, necessarily to those.
I know, too, that's right. It does say tier.
Okay, so I'm gonna move really quickly here and drop that for the moment. We would like to have a site visit, right? That was what
Yes.
we both talked about. Is it very soon? Is it possible for a couple of people to coordinate that for us as the facilitators? We don't know the area, we don't know how to, where to go, when to go, how to go. are there members of the task force that would be willing to take that on, to sort of be our tour guides? Come up with some suggested dates, we can poll for you and, you know, find that out, but people, you know, having a guide would be really helpful to us. Look at the dam, look at whatever you think we should look at, the outfalls. Are you
I'll volunteer
volunteering?
for
Okay.
that.
Walk right around the pond.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think we can just do a walking tour.
yes. Yes.
Happy to help.
We started.
Okay.
Keith
So
and-
perfect.
Keith, Malcolm and Jeff,
Malcolm.
did you want, okay, great, Keith, Malcolm and Jeff.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, we'll leave it to you, and then your assignment would be to let us know what the plan is.
Right,
Where to meet you when.
Yeah, where to
Yeah.
meet and when.
that's good. And we can do a poll
Yeah, when.
on when,
On when.
like, I'll find a time that works for as many people as possible.
Right. And we can do more than one,
Well,
obviously.
It might be good to just know while everyone's here is like a Saturday morning, just not gonna work. For any, I mean, should we just get some like general time frame established now before we send out a poll?
Would Saturday morning work for people?
Good work.
Generally speaking, sure.
Depends on the Saturday.
Well,
We send it out for
no block, but if you have like a standing brunch.
No. Are we allowed to bring children and family with us?
Yes. it's
Yeah.
public site visit.
They're not, because we're not,
The public
they're
is,
not, they don't live in Concord.
that's okay.
Okay,
Great,
all right, yes. Please plan us something.
okay. Do you want to talk
Okay, next meeting,
next meeting?
next
Okay,
meeting is May
Um,
21st.
great, so let me
Artie
go,
Wheeler?
yeah,
Is
just,
that where we're going?
yeah, you want to talk about the criteria piece or?
Well, it's
We don't have
7
time.
o'clock.
All right, yeah, sorry. So here we go. No, I mean, I was talking about the work group.
Oh, the work group.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, I think, let's leave that,
We're not
now. Let's
gonna
get
do-
comments on our draft and then, yeah. The test drive,
Oh.
Yeah, I like
Leave
that.
yeah, yeah.
Leave that.
All right, so just to share some next steps, next meeting is coming up fast, May 21st. We will be talking about the 2023 alternatives analysis report. We also, I think, will bring into that conversation, planning for an initial public meeting. I think probably time to do that, at least that's our thought. We're not gonna do this criteria test drive thing for now. That was something we thought about,
Right.
but we'll
It's
take your
something else-
feedback. Yeah, something else to think about.
for you to think about. This was the suggestion to
Right,
practice using the criteria from the Envision Concord to see
yeah,
how it would work.
right, and we can pull you on that.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can pull you on that, and we can talk about that later.
And so I think, and so we will instead be sending out a survey, well, similar to what we did with the 2018 report, have you all requested. We'll hear from our, hopefully, from our site visit group, on some plans for that, as another next step. And then, as is our, approach, we're gonna send out a meeting feedback form to you all.
We really do want your feedback.
Yeah.
Even if we don't always do
Do
what
it.
we want,
Yeah.
I'd like to know.
All right,
All right, so having just attended, so the meeting, that part of the meeting is done, having just attended town meeting. I'm reminded of something that my mentor used to say to me when I was head of school, that everyone is a hero in their own story. Everybody thinks they have it down. So, we're opening this up for public comments, but again, I'm gonna ask you to be, and for anyone who wants to speak, to be respectful in your comments, avoid personal attacks, and keep your comments to no more than 2 minutes. And with that, we open it up to the public. Does anyone have anything they want to say?
Yes, I try to be respectful, but
You can do it.
the 2 minutes, I don't know. Just one minor comment.
Sorry, just name and address for the.
Dan Stapleton, 20 Conan, a little about a block away from Pond.
Good.
Just one minor thing that might be of interest. It's not totally pertinent, but you talk about the pond there, let me just back up. I looked at the pre-sediment topography of the Warner Pond area. And one of the reasons I think that we have deeper sediment in that one area, I think you're correct, it was an original depression. And the actual channel of Fort Pond is not where it's currently located. It was historically farther to the north, much closer to that area. So I think we're looking at, and you can actually see that if you look at the farm fields. They go down to about elevation 121, you'll see it on a rainy day, you'll see a wet spot. That's the old channel. It's the original natural river channel. So minor thing, but I think there is several hundred years or more of sediment going on, prior to the dam related sedimentation. relationship between sediment and phosphorus. I noticed they only tested total phosphorus in 2012. That the testing data, you know, at first glance, you'd see a correlation with total suspended sediment. So the phosphorus goes up when the suspended sediment. I don't know that that's necessarily a correlation, but I think it's kind of pertinent to some of the discussion I heard here before. I get some questions about the actual bid, and in full disclosure, I am an engineer. I was an owner and partner of an engineering firm. We actually were dam engineering the dam restoration. We've done a lot of work with Charter. We've done dam removals. We've done dredging projects. So I know Charter fairly well. Mr. Hannon, is your sense that that bid was an anomalous bid? And I say that in the context, I think there were two engineering estimates performed for the town prior to that. Both came, you know, I think there were slightly different schemes in the dredging, but they came pretty close on the unit pricing or the total pricing. It also came close to your price in your sort of conceptual one. So I'm just wondering, you think that was just an odd bid, or do you think that's representative of the cost of dredging? And sort of follow-up questions to that, DNR, the Natural Resource Committee. You know, I have a question. Why was it not rebid? And what would the permits allowed to expire? And did you consider going back to the state and the Corps, particularly in light of COVID, for permit extensions on that dredging rather than letting them expire? So I'm assuming they've expired. I don't know that.
No.
If they haven't expired, maybe they could be extended still in light of COVID. So I would encourage those discussions. I know that it's probably premature. I know you're looking at this, but I imagine there will be some dredging associated with the dam removal, and that wouldn't be limited to removal of the dam embankments. If you look at the elevation, the mudline elevation where Neshoba Brook enters, it's around 117, 118. We need to be down around 115 at the bridge. If you look at around a 35-foot channel, so I'm just pulling these numbers out, but that's what the existing channel is. You know, you're talking about 5 to possibly 10,000 yards of dredging. So a lot of these dredging issues, I don't think are limited to just a dredging option. I think they're going to come up again in other issues. And you're going to also with dam removal, you have a lot of sediment control issues. You're going to be bringing up a lot of sediments. So I think those are my questions. But I guess, again, to confirm, was it anomalous? Did you look at the, I think there were a 2012 engineering estimate, 2018, right? My computer kind of.
And there was a 2022 cost estimate.
And 222,
Yeah.
were they, those three felt similar, those.
So it went from 1 million in 2012, 2 million in 2018, and 3 million in August or July of
With
2022.
different quantities, were they different dredging?
No, it was
schemes,
just
or the
different, so
exact
it's
same?
conceptual design,
All the way
you
through.
know, through the final design.
Yeah, I mean, but 1 to 3 still feels
Well,
like the ballpark, so.
At
Right.
least by 2018, the plan was to bring the material to the prison grounds. And so the anomalous bid, which it was, their plan was to not do that.
Well, they said this, I don't know if the engineering estimates had a disposal option identified in.
No, I mean, I think the plan, as I've read it, and all these documents and the RFP was to bring the material to the prison. That was always the plan.
From
So
the
those,
original-
so those estimates are all based on, sorry?
From the original 2012 estimate,
No,
that
we
was the
didn't.
plan.
I don't think the prison was
we-
called out by that. I think it was just a very conceptual idea, just general dredging costs.
We have to stop soon because I think your questions are fantastic. I think we should explore some of them, but I think we have to stop soon. Anybody else have a comment?
I did have one last note, sorry.
All right,
This
one
is
last
kind of
note.
an important one. Because we talked a lot about sedimentation, and I don't know if as a group, if you've considered the source of that sedimentation. I think there's probably a general sense that we have this huge watershed and sediments just flowing down from everywhere. And I don't think that's in fact the case. I think in particular, we have two tributaries entering into Warren's Pond, right, we have Fort Pond Brook, and we have Neshoba Brook. Both of them have impoundments.
Right.
Not very far upstream. So a lot of the heavier sediment, which is 80% sand. So when you take your tour, I encourage you to walk up the bicycle, the rail trail.
Yeah.
All the way into Ice Pond Dam.
Yeah. I know.
And just look over to the side along the banks of the New, unfortunately, Acton owns that property, but that, most of that sedimentation is a result of poor shoreline stabilization management.
Mhm.
So just kind of keep that in mind, and it's not miles, it's a fairly short stretch.
I know what you mean. Sounds good. Any other comments? 2 minutes?
There's a comment online from, looks like Anna.
Miguel Chavari, homeowner at 255 Commonwealth Ave. I just have an observation, especially since we're talking about the dredging bridge project. Just to the observation again is, as Keith had brought out, you had the same contractor bidding in Concord and the contractor actually dredging over in Milford. And as we know, in Milford, they were able to dredge 210,000 cubic yards more than what was proposed in Concord. And even with inflation, they were able to do it for millions of dollars less. So then that I kind of asked the question as to why Concord's so expensive.
We've been around all that before.
We've all been touching upon that, but the key thing here though is that on the Concord design, it was predicated on bringing the sediment over to the prison.
Correct.
It was also predicated on the prison being able to receive 100% of the sediment. Okay, based on item 12 of the charter bid, that they were only able to receive 10% of the sediment. So then basically, simply put, the reason the bid failed was because the design wasn't viable. Okay, so that should be stated. I mean.
Well, we've already been talking about that. So I think that's
Okay.
good.
But
That's good.
I think I would just also like to respond to that because you're right that with the addendum, there was a shift in where the sediment was going to be disposed of. And we don't have the ability to know where that was going to be disposed of. The contractor, if they had been awarded the bid, we would have known at that time.
Mhm.
But we expect that they're gonna be competitively bidding. But even if like with the, if all of the sediment were to be discharged at the prison, there is a cost associated with that. So the bid, the $9.5 million bid, if all the money went to the prison, which was the initial intention, it would have gone down to about 7 million.
Okay, I'm not
So-
gonna go back and forth on it,
No.
but the reason that this is important though is because as a result, we had the alternative site that was $4.5 million, so that was the key cost driver, but
Mhm.
that's what proclaimed the dredging was too expensive, which is the formation of this committee. So now that we're starting to talk about being able to, that dredging is affordable, I would like to remind everyone that the town of Concord, the town meeting has mandated the town to be, the pond to be dredged. It was only halted when it was determined it was too expensive. So, I mean.
That's fantastic, but I think you have to let this committee do its work and not be jumping to a conclusion for us. So thank you for your comments, but I think that has to be enough.
There's
Thank you.
another person waiting.
Yes, somebody else, yes,
Is it my turn?
I'm sorry, yeah, I couldn't see your name. Allison, yes, please.
It's actually Anna Feldwig from
Oh,
340.
Anna, sorry, yeah.
Yes, I have questions about the initial process of getting the bid as well. And I mean, if 19 pages of requirements to dump at the prison is sort of an obvious deterrent. And I was wondering if there was any discussion even at the very beginning about whether that was the best idea and what would be, how was the response when nothing came in the day? It seems like no bids were coming in, and then maybe at the very last minute, this addendum was made saying, okay, you can dump it anywhere you want. But then there was only one bid. It seems to me like if people knew or were contacted and said, hey, we realize this prison plan is not feasible. Would you like to bid again, dumping it wherever you want? You would have gotten more bids. I don't understand why it was sort of just dropped.
But they were allowed to decide where they wanted to dispose of material. Is that what you mean, or?
Well, I'm confused about the timing. That the addendum to the RFP was put out one day before the one bid that came in. And I think that's not correct.
Well, let me ask you this, why are we going back over this now? We've been through all this.
Because this is why we have the task force. This is why, because this was mishandled from the beginning.
I don't want to get into whether something's mishandled. I think the truth is we have a task force. We're working hard to come to a solution and we're working well. So I think going back over that past history is not necessarily very useful. And frankly, as far as the prison piece is confirmed, as brought up, I have been a former head of school. I have to tell you, I've seen enormously elaborate documents when we try to bring in contractors onto a school about who's allowed on the property, about felony charges, about all sorts of things. And I can't say it really discouraged. Sometimes it did, but sometimes it didn't, and we didn't always know. So I don't want to go back over all that history. I think we just need to move forward. I think Keith made a great presentation. We have lots of things to think about, and we should just go forward from this point.
Other
Any
people,
other comments, questions? Thank you. Oh, one more. Okay, one more. But let's not go back over histories. Yes.
Alyssa Brown,
Alyssa, yeah.
I was just struck as we were going over all these questions on the 2018 report. I've always been a little bit confused as how the pond will look after dredging,
Yeah.
even of just the south area. And I think it would be really interesting to see that, because I suspect that the western and perhaps southwestern whole area of the pond will go away. And I'm not sure people understand that when they talk about the dredging project. And now with this added thought of maybe we ought to dredge a bigger area, but then we'll even have less wetlands involved. It will really alter the way people think of the pond.
Yeah.
The pond maybe become more of a stream anyway, after this whole dredging project. So that was one thought. The other thing is I just wanted to raise once again, I know it's in the 2018 report still, but how will dredging really improve the ecological restoration of the pond in terms of fish transport, in terms of water quality?
Well, that's something which might come up next time as we look at the alternative analysis, I would think.
That's
Anything else?
Just wanted to check, I don't think we got Anna's address. And
Anna, your address?
343 Commonwealth Avenue.
Thank you. All right, meeting adjourned.
Was,
Anybody else?
I thought there was one other person on Zoom, but maybe not.
I don't think
maybe
so.
not. Okay,
Yeah.
Allison had her hand up.
So that was
Anna.
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 Yeah.
Oh, there was Allison and Haley also.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, no further business, then I'm adjourning the meeting at 7:18.
Thank you, Chris and Bill. Thanks, Keith. Thank you.